In the gentle embrace of sunrise, our residential enclave presented itself as a placid tableau, the streets unfurled like ribbons of serenity, flanked by manicured lawns that stood as testament to the silent covenant of suburban living. Here, the morning air was crisp, almost biting, yet softened by the distant warble of awakening birds. My hedge was a proud sentinel, a lush tapestry of green that marked the boundary of my world, meticulously trimmed and nurtured. It whispered stories of patience and care. That was until the day Karen came into my life. Oh, Karen, the embodiment of the HOA's indomitable spirit and my neighbor with a sharp eye for perceived infractions. Her presence was a shadow, lingering at the edge of one's peripheral vision, annoying yet impossible to ignore. Her first strike was subtle, yet unmissable, a prelude to the symphony of vexations that would follow. One morning, as dew kissed the leaves, I noticed the top of my hedge clipped with surgical precision, a line too straight to be accidental. I paused, my breath mingling with the cold, forming clouds of contemplation. Her handiwork, no doubt, a silent declaration of war. Karen had always been one for rules, her life a tapestry of regulations and bylaws, woven tightly with threads of control. My hedge, a perceived offense in her eyes, had become her latest conquest. It was a whisper in the wind, a reminder that her gaze was unflinching, her approval conditional. Still, I chose peace. My response was a gentle nod toward civility, an internal acknowledgement of the petty skirmish she sought. I let it slide, like the morning fog dissipated by the sun. After all, battles of such nature were often waged not with swords, but with silent endurance. Days passed with the rhythm of life, each blending into the next, yet Karen's presence loomed larger, her actions small but marked with an air of deliberate encroachment. The hedge was only the beginning. She soon turned her attention to other aspects of my sanctuary. The paint on my mailbox, a perceived flaw in my garden gnome's positioning. Each time, I met her silent challenges with a smile, a quiet refusal to engage in her game. Internally, my thoughts simmered, a teapot on the verge of whistling. I marveled at her persistence, her commitment to the art of irritation. Was it boredom or a need for control that drove her? I pondered this as the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, painting the sky in hues of resignation. And so, life in our enclave continued, a dance of subtle tensions beneath the veneer of calm. Karen's machinations were like ripples on a pond, disrupting the surface but never reaching the depth of my resolve. Yet, the seed of something deeper took root within me, a quiet resolve, a notion that perhaps the time would come to respond, to tilt the scales in this unspoken war of attrition. For now, I watched, waited, and nurtured my hedge with renewed care. It stood resilient, a testament to endurance against the storms of suburban politics. But beneath the calm exterior, plans were forming, each thought a brick in the foundation of a future reckoning. Because sometimes, even the most patient among us must rise and ensure that balance is restored not through conflict, but with a subtlety that even the most vigilant eyes cannot foresee. The scent of clipped grass lingered as I stood at the edge of my yard, where my beloved hedge once thrived. Now, only a ragged line of butchered green remained, a casualty of Karen's relentless pursuit of control. Her new title, Queen of Rules, seemed to have gone to her head, as if she had cracked open a book of bylaws and found her scepter within its pages. Karen lived 2 houses down, in a pristine white colonial with a driveway that gleamed like polished bone. Her car, a sleek, silver sedan, was the chariot she rode on her daily rounds of inspection, and inspect she did, with the fervor of a crusader. Her eyes were everywhere, searching for transgressions like a hawk watching over a chicken coop. Soon enough, envelopes began appearing in mailboxes, Like harbingers of doom, each bore the same ominous mark: notice of violation. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones at the mailbox, their voices like whispers on the wind. The Ridleys were cited for a wind chime that dared sing too loudly. The Hancocks were fined for a garden gnome that didn't meet the aesthetic guidelines. Even the Johnsons, who never bothered anyone, were warned about their Christmas lights, though it was only October. I watched this with the calm detachment of a man observing a distant storm. Karen's reign was absurd, a theater of the absurd where logic played no part. She wielded the HOA rules like a maestro conducting an orchestra of chaos. The neighborhood was her stage, and she reveled in the applause of her own making. Yet, in her zealous quest, Karen underestimated the undercurrent of resistance growing beneath the surface. People were tired of living in fear of her whims, her penchant for order. The community was a tapestry of lives and stories, and she was stitching new patterns with clumsy hands. One evening, as the sky dimmed to a soft indigo, I stood by my window, sipping coffee. There was a peculiar satisfaction in watching Karen's sedan purr to a stop in her driveway. She exited with the precision of a soldier returning from battle. A satchel of citations swung over her shoulder. But the night held its secrets. The winds whispered conspiracies, binding the neighborhood in a silent pact. The Ridleys, the Hancocks, the Johnsons. They were tired of the citations, the gossip, the relentless scrutiny, and in that weariness, a plan began to take form, inspired by the quiet resolve of those united by unjust fate. I knew what I had to do. It was a decision rooted not in malice, but in a desire for balance, a lesson, perhaps, in humility for our self-appointed queen. Her car, her prized possession, would be the canvas for this lesson, a subtle alteration, a testament to the power of quiet rebellion. As I pondered this, the night stretched on, wrapping the neighborhood in its tranquil embrace. The air was thick with potential, the promise of change. I placed my empty cup down, the clink against the countertop breaking the silence. It was time to reclaim more than just a hedge. It was time to reclaim a piece of our community's soul. The morning after the Hedge incident, the air was heavy with the scent of dew and the distant promise of rain. I stood by the window, the outline of the damaged hedge now a gaping wound against my otherwise pristine garden. HOA Karen, with her perpetual scowl, had seen fit to exercise her illusory power over an arbitrary rule, and in doing so, had pruned not just my greenery but my patience. I turned away from the window, drawing a deep breath, calm, collected. It was time to document everything. The files I had gathered over the previous months were a testament to Karen's reign of terror. Each HOA meeting transcript, each passive-aggressive email. They were all neatly organized in a folder now metaphorically titled Reckoning. The decision was made with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. I began with photographs. The hedge, now just a sad, uneven line of twigs, bore silent witness to her pettiness. Each photo captured the jagged edges, the brutality of her hedge trimmers. I juxtaposed these with images from happier times, a lush, green barrier that once whispered secrets only to the wind, evidence, undeniable. Documentation was not enough, though I needed subtlety, a slow burn that would leave an impression as lasting as a brand. I knew her weakness lay parked in her driveway, a shiny red testament to her ego, that car, always positioned just so, as if on display in a showroom rather than a suburban cul-de-sac. I spent the afternoon acquiring the necessary tools, not the crude implements of Karen's destruction, but rather a small, innocuous-looking device that would cause her vehicle to protest in the most disgruntled and embarrassing of ways. Subtlety was key, a soft, persistent beep that would elude resolution, a symphony of inconvenience. The next morning, under the guise of a neighborhood jog. I approached her driveway. The street was quiet, the early risers retreating into the comfort of their homes for breakfast. With deft hands and a heart steady with calm intent, I planted the device. It was elegantly simple, hidden from sight but powerful enough to achieve my purpose. I returned home, the anticipation coiling like a spring within me. It was a waiting game now, one I was more than prepared to play. As the day unfolded, I went about my routine, each task a distraction from the anticipation of unfolding events. Then, like clockwork, as predictable as the morning sun, Karen emerged. The shrill beep started its relentless chant, a mockingbird refusing to be silenced. Karen's footsteps halted, her head tilting like that of a puzzled dog. "What's wrong with this thing?" Her voice carried across the lawn, sharp and laced with frustration. The irony was not lost on me. Her hedge trimming had been but a single act in her symphony of control. Now, here she was, undone by a sound, her shoulders tensed, her fingers fumbling for solutions that remained just out of reach. I watched from my window. Hidden behind the curtain's veil, satisfaction settled over me, not from her distress, but from the balance restored, the scales evened, not through chaos, but through calculated calm. The beeping would stop eventually, perhaps when she least expected it, leaving her to wonder if it was all in her mind. Until then, I would enjoy this quiet rebellion. The hedge would regrow, stronger, more resilient, just like me, its roots unwavering beneath the surface. And Karen, well, she'd learned that not every battle is won with a trimmer in hand. Some are won with patience, precision, and an unyielding sense of irony. The hum of the neighborhood had shifted, like a hive disturbed by a misplaced footstep. A quiet buzz permeated our suburban enclave. The air was thick with something unseen, like a storm building just beyond the horizon. My actions, subtle yet deliberate, had set invisible ripples through the well-manicured lawns and perfectly paved driveways, where every blade of grass stood at attention under the vigilant watch of the HOA. In the days following my nocturnal escapade, Karen's driveway had become a canvas of silent judgment. Her once pristine sedan, now a clunky metal sculpture of humbled arrogance, drew eyes like moths to a flame. The crumpled fender and shattered taillight whispered secrets to the observant. Neighbors, those perennial spectators of suburban drama, began to linger longer during their morning routines. They paused, coffee cups in hand, pretending to marvel at the sunrise or discuss the latest high school football game. But their glances, sharp and probing, betrayed their true interest. The sedan, like an unsolved mystery, sat accusingly for all to see. I walked past the scene each day with measured steps, my face a mask of practiced indifference. Inside, my heart thrummed with a quiet rhythm of satisfaction. Justice, it seemed, had a poetic edge. Karen, ever the embodiment of suburban tyranny, had met her match not in loud confrontation, but in the gentle press of consequences she couldn't control. She remained unseen in the days after. Her presence felt only through the closed curtains of her corner house. The neighborhood grapevine thrived on her absence. Stories spun into complex webs of speculation, a fender bender, a hit and run. Theories varied like the colors of autumn leaves. But I knew the truth, and within me, it settled like sediment after a storm. Yet, the air grew taut with expectation, a collective anticipation of what would follow suit, for the neighborhood had long been Karen's stage, and she its commanding director. Her silence, an uncharacteristic void, left the audience both relieved and on edge. There was a strange irony in her retreat, a retreat forced by the very vehicle she once used to trample boundaries and assert dominance. I wandered the pathways, the scenery unchanged yet slightly off-kilter. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows that danced their slow waltz across driveways and mailboxes. It was here, amidst the whispering trees and the silent, knowing streets, that I found a peculiar peace. The world continued its ceaseless spin, unperturbed by our petty wars and quiet victories. In time, the whispers would fade, replaced by new stories and fresh scandals. But for now, the neighborhood hung in a delicate balance, a strange equilibrium where justice had finally been served, with a side of irony. And as I walked, my steps light with quiet triumph, I realized there was beauty in the slow unraveling of control, a beauty Karen would never truly understand. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and inaction is the most potent form of action. The sun set on the day's chaos, leaving behind a cloak of quiet over the neighborhood. The only sounds were the retreating whispers of children being called inside, and the distant hum of a lawnmower, stubbornly working overtime. I stood at my window, gazing at the remnants of my once proud hedge. Karen's whims had turned it into an unsightly tangle, a mocking testament to her quest for aesthetic uniformity. But I had a plan, as neat as a well-tended garden. Revenge, when cultivated just right, doesn't sprout overnight. It requires patience, precision, and the right tools. The internet is a wonderful resource. HOA bylaws, local regulations, environmental protection acts. My evenings were spent immersed in legal jargon and council minutes. I delved deeper, each clause and stipulation a shovel digging for truth, until I unearthed a gem, an obscure clause, one that no one else probably read or cared about, danced across the page like a secret weapon. The HOA's own rules, their own words, would be her downfall. The clause stated the preservation of native flora as a priority. My hedge, though nurtured by my hands, consisted of such flora. It had been thriving long before the HOA imposed its sterile vision of beauty. The irony was delicious. Karen, self-appointed guardian of the bylaws, had overlooked the very essence of her role. With quiet determination, I filed a formal complaint not against Karen directly, but against the HOA. It was their responsibility. After all, they had allowed this violation to occur. I included photographs, reports, timestamps. Every piece of evidence was meticulously compiled, each page a step toward reclaiming my dignity. Days passed, and the neighborhood buzz simmered. Karen strutted about, blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. She was a peacock among pigeons, each step a testament to her imagined superiority, but the wheel of justice was turning, slow and silent, like the ticking of a clock she could not hear. When the letter arrived, it was a simple white envelope slipped under my door. The HOA had convened. As I knew they would, Karen was summoned. Her presence requested for a hearing. The irony was sweet enough to taste. Karen, who had made the sidewalks echo with her opinions, would now stand judged by the very codes she adored. The day of the hearing was overcast, a fitting backdrop. I watched from my window as Karen stomped toward the community hall, her expression a thundercloud. Her car, a gleaming symbol of status, sat smug and polished in the driveway. Little did she know, it, too, was part of the reckoning. The ruling was swift. Karen's actions were deemed a violation. Her disregard for the native flora, a breach of HOA regulations. Fines were imposed, and her car, parked too often on the grass, another infraction would bear the additional cost. The HOA had to make amends. After all, it ended quietly, as these things often do. No grand theatrics, no public apology, just a shift in the wind, a recalibration of power. Karen's peacock strut lost its grandeur, her presence now a whisper rather than a roar. As for my hedge, it would grow again, resilient and strong, and in the end, it was the silence that was most satisfying, the quiet acknowledgement that the rules she cherished had turned against her, a reminder that true power resides not in noise, but in quiet, unwavering resolve. The aftermath of the storm was both quiet and loud in its own way. Karen's car, a once pristine symbol of her self-importance, now sat crumpled at the edge of the driveway like a discarded plaything. It seemed almost poetic, really. How the metal and glass had twisted into a grotesque sculpture, a testament to the power of nature, or was it just karma in disguise? The community gathered, hushed whispers and stolen glances weaving through the air. I watched from a distance, a subtle satisfaction curling in my chest. Not from the damage itself, I am not so petty as to take pleasure in destruction, but from the shift it signaled. The reign of Karen was over, her iron grip on the neighborhood loosening like sand slipping through her fingers. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the scene. It felt like the universe was cleaning house, sweeping away the remnants of her tyranny with each bright ray. There's a sort of irony in how the light can reveal things hidden in the shadows. A week ago, my hedge stood tall, a verdant barrier that marked the boundary of my little sanctuary. I had nurtured it with care, each leaf a testament to patience and persistence. But then came Karen, wielding the HOA rules like a weapon, her disdain masked by a veneer of neighborly concern. She had crushed it, both literally and figuratively, leaving me with nothing but broken branches and the bitter taste of injustice. Now, the tables had turned. Her car, once an untouchable fortress, bore the unmistakable mark of the universe's balancing hand. There was a lesson here, hidden beneath the twisted metal and shattered glass, something about respect and consequences. Perhaps, or maybe it was simpler than that, just the natural ebb and flow of life, with its own brand of poetic justice. People milled about, some offering Karen empty platitudes, others just soaking in the spectacle. Her face was a mask of controlled fury, the kind that simmers beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to erupt. But there was no eruption today, just the slow unraveling of her authority, thread by thread. I turned away, letting the scene dissolve behind me like smoke in the wind. The hedge would grow back, slowly but surely. Nature has a way of mending itself, of reclaiming what's been taken, and so would the community, freed from Karen's grip. It would find its own rhythm again. Later, I walked the perimeter of my yard, fingers brushing against the remnants of the hedge. It would take time, but it would flourish once more. Just as the neighborhood would heal from the reign of Karen, we would mend, stronger and wiser, with roots that ran deeper and bonds that held firmer. The quiet power of resilience, I mused, is often underestimated. It's not about fighting fire with fire, but about letting things unfold in their natural course. The strength lies in patience, in waiting for the right moment to let go and let things fall as they may. In the end, Karen was sidelined not by force, but by the quiet persistence of time and consequence. The community restored itself, each person a vital thread in the tapestry of our shared lives. I could feel the shift, a subtle but profound recalibration that breathed life back into our streets, into our... As I settled into the comfort of my home, a calm washed over me. The hedge would grow, the community would thrive, and Karen, well, she would have her own lessons to learn. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that unfold slowly, in the spaces between words, in the quiet aftermath of a storm